This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Africa Cup of Nations tournament kicks off with hosts Cameroon taking on Burkina Faso.
It is my expectation that we will take the appropriate decisions that will advance the future of Mali and our community.
West African Regional Bloc currently meeting to discuss the direction of Mali's transition after request to delay elections. And security forces face off with protesters in Khartoum ahead of expected signing of political charter. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe. The long-awaited 33rd edition of the Africa Cup of Nations has kicked off today in Cameroon as 24 teams battle it out to be crowned Africa's best in football. Currently, the game between Burkina Faso and Cameroon is on halftime, Cameroon leading Burkina Faso by 2-1. The opening ceremony held in the capital Yaoundé was well attended, with the president of Cameroon alongside his wife. CAF President Dr. Patrice Motsepe was also present at the Stade Municipal Paul Biya. After the opening ceremony, the first game kicked off at the same venue. The Burkina Faso goal came in the 24th minute when a Bertrand Traoré cross was met by Gustavo Sangaré. But the indomitable Lions equalized from the penalty spot after Traoré brought down Zambo Anguissa in the penalty box in the 40th minute. The spot kick was awarded after a VAR check. The second Cameroon goal also came through an Abubakar penalty at the stroke of halftime. And from Cameroon, let's bring in Gio, the head of sports Cameroon Radio. He joins us live via Zoom from Yaoundé. Gio, what's the latest on the Cameroon-Burkina Faso match?
Well, the latest is the second half will be kicking off in the minutes ahead, but the hosts, fortunately, are ahead 2-1, courtesy of 2 goals, 2 penalties scored by Captain Vincent Boubacar, who in the process becomes Cameroon's third all-time leading scorer in the history of the team. The fans, I can tell you, are in a delirium of joy at the moment, especially after the goal by Gustavo Sangaré at the 24th minute sent the 60,000-seater Olembe Stadium into graveyard silence. The only people we could hear in this facility were the Stallions, diehards, who were jubilant, who were screaming, and who were exhilarating. But after the equalizer and the second goal from Vincent Boubacar, the Cameroonian fans seemingly have come to life. But it looks to me that Cameroon's coach Antonio Conceicao, judging by his reaction at halftime, will be making a few changes, and I expect to see 2 attackers coming, especially Bayern Munich forward Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting and Dynamo Moscow winger Quentin Dier.
There was doubts earlier after some Burkina Faso players tested positive for COVID-19. Are there any such concerns about other teams in the matches coming up tonight and tomorrow?
Well, I am not quite certain. I think they have 5 players who tested positive for COVID. But when you look at the quality of this Stallions side, they do not look like a side that's affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. They're playing with instinctive fluency. They're very talented. They've pressed, they've played some high-octane football this far, and they've really been good going up front. They've defended pretty well, apart from the 2 reckless mistakes that were made that led to penalties. They've really been decent. Their goalkeeper hasn't really been tested. The 2 non-attempts on targets for Cameroon have been those penalties where they've looked like a very decent side. And just imagine if they had all the players playing in here. Some of the players who tested positive are very key players. The players playing the trip for important clubs, and they were an integral part of the Stallions setup. And it will be interesting to see as the competition unfolds what they can do when these players return to action.
All right, Njie Eno, thank you very much for joining us, and all the best to your team. Now, West African leaders are meeting in Ghana's capital, Accra, to discuss the political crisis in Mali. This comes after the regional bloc ECOWAS rejected Mali's transitional leaders' proposal of a 5-year transition to constitutional rule. ECOWAS has been urging Mali's military government to hold elections in February to return the country to civilian rule. The regional bloc has imposed financial and travel sanctions on members of Mali's transitional government and their relatives. The Economic Community of West African states has also threatened further sanctions if Mali fails to hold elections next month. Sunday's meeting in Accra is to look at Mali's timetable for elections and the transition to civilian rule. The meeting is also likely to discuss sanctions to be imposed on Mali should the country not agree to the regional bloc's plan for a return to civilian rule.
The official proposal submitted to me by the transition authorities under the hand of its head indicated that the transition period should run for 5 years. Subsequently, by a letter to me dated 7th January 2022, 2 days ago, the head of the Malian transition stated that the period had now been modified to 4 years. Excellencies, it is this decision that we're meeting to review to determine whether it complies with the agreement reached on 15 September 2020 and embodied in the Transition Charter, and more fundamentally, whether it conforms to the community principles as enshrined in the ECOWAS Supplementary Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance. It is my expectation that we will take the appropriate decisions that will advance the future of Mali and our community.
CGTN's Nabil Ahmed is following the developments in Ghana. He joins us live from Accra. Nabil, what do we know so far from the ECOWAS meeting?
Well, Peninah, the meeting has been ongoing for over 3 hours since the chairman, that's Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo, gave the opening speech, as you rightly played a while ago. And we're expecting the chairman to address the media on the outcome of the meeting with the West African leaders for over an hour. It's still not been held, but then the media is in there and some of the leaders are also in the conference room waiting for the chairman of ECOWAS, President Nana Akufo-Addo, to actually address us on what the outcome of the meeting has been. But then the signals we are picking on the ground is that the leaders have said the plan or the proposal that the transition government in Mali has given to ECOWAS to hold elections in the next 5 years is unacceptable, and they would want the leaders to consider holding the elections as planned earlier next month, that's February. We also are picking signals that the regional bloc is likely to impose stiffer sanctions on Mali for failing to go ahead with the original plan to hold elections in February, because they said from the last ECOWAS summit that we had, there was a laid out plan as to how they should be able to conduct the elections, and now going back on their word is really a slap in the face. So the ECOWAS regional bloc is looking at imposing sanctions which include maintaining the already existing sanctions, which has to do with the imposition of financial restrictions and also travel ban on the leaders of the Mali transition and their families. And now going forward, they are looking at stiffening these sanctions further on these West African country, that's Mali, and that would include shutting the borders of the other West African countries to Mali, and that's going to really affect the economy of Mali. So this is what we are picking so far while we await the president of Ghana, that's the chairman of ECOWAS, Nana Akufo-Addo, to really tell us what they arrived at the communique of this after finishing this particular meeting. Peninah.
All right, Nabil, thank you for that update. Nabil Ahmed, live for us in Accra. Security forces on Sunday fired tear gas as thousands rallied in Sudan's capital Khartoum and a neighboring city. The rallies, according to witnesses, are meant to keep up pressure on the military following a takeover 11 weeks ago. The October 25th coup, led by Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, disrupted a power-sharing transition between the military and civilians. According to witnesses, security forces fired tear gas as protesters headed towards the presidential palace. Police erected roadblocks to prevent people converging at the palace and at army headquarters. The resumption of protests since the coup has been met with a crackdown that has killed at least 60 people, according to medics. The United Nations on Saturday said it would facilitate talks between key Sudanese stakeholders in a bid to resolve the political crisis. All Sudanese doctors also rallied around several hospitals in Khartoum in what they called the White Procession. The doctors say they did this to commemorate the storming of a hospital in the capital 3 years ago by the regular forces. They were also protesting attacks on medical staff and hospitals as they attended to those injured in demonstrations across the country. A day before the demonstrations, the Khartoum State Security Committee issued a statement expressing regret over the violation of the sanctity of health institutions in Sudan. Aid agencies in Somalia are overwhelmed by the impact of the ongoing drought situation in the country as more people, mainly pastoralists who lost their livelihoods, are displaced to big cities. Meanwhile, government is making concerted efforts to help affected communities, as Mohammed Kahir reports from the capital, Mogadishu.
The impact of drought in Somalia has significantly increased across the country, following 3 consecutive below-average rainy seasons. Humanitarian agencies are warning of dire consequences facing the affected people, mainly pastoralists. According to the latest data, close to 3 million people are affected by the ongoing famine, with more than 300,000 displaced, mainly farmers and livestock keepers. The drought has been particularly very harsh in the regions like Jubaland, Southwest, and Galmudug states, where most pastoralists live. More than 3 million livestock, mostly camels, are facing shortage of pasture and water due to delayed rainy seasons. Concerted efforts led by the federal government to help people affected are underway since an emergency meeting by the cabinet in November last year. This past week, the federal government delivered financial aid to respective states in order for them to help deal with the humanitarian situation. Also, the members of the international community were not left behind by responding to the calls made by the Somali government. A humanitarian consignment by the United Arab Emirates was also delivered to Somali government for distribution. Likewise, Turkish aid agencies are providing the much needed help, especially in the most affected areas. Mohammed Kahir, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Straight ahead. 5,800 people detained amid riots in Kazakhstan and Unrest, with 164 people dead so far. Nearly 6,000 people have been arrested, including a number of foreigners in Kazakhstan. They were detained during last week's violent protests. Media reports say at least 164 people have also been killed, most of them in the city of Almaty. Demonstrations began last Wednesday against a fuel price rise, but morphed into a wider protest against the government. The cabinet resigned on the same day, and the president sought help from the Collective Security Treaty Organization. The group has sent troops to Kazakhstan and will meet online tomorrow to discuss the situation. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan's first president has resigned from his lifetime position as head of the National Security Committee. Nursultan Nazarbayev reportedly made the decision to help the government cope with the current difficult situation. Julia Chapman has more about Russia's deployment of peacekeepers to Kazakhstan.
But from Moscow's perspective, it believes that this was a legitimate deployment of troops because they were asked for by President Kasim-Jomart Tokayev, and they responded very, very quickly, sending in troops almost immediately after that request was made last week. This is the first time the CSTO has ever sent peacekeeping forces on request from one of the member states. Two such requests have been rejected in the past, and it certainly does seem to lend to the idea coming from Kazakhstan, from the authorities, the government there. There are foreign forces, foreign fighters involved in the protests over the past week. They haven't provided any evidence of that, and it is certainly a difficult claim to verify. But Russia seems to be agreeing with that. The other CSTO members do as well, and they believe that this deployment was necessary to help maintain stability in Kazakhstan.
In an exclusive interview with CGTN, the press secretary of Collective Security Treaty Organization, Vladimir Zainetdinov, spoke about why the organization decided to dispatch their troops to Kazakhstan.
The basis for the introduction of collective peacekeeping forces was the decision of the CSTO Collective Security Council, which was adopted on January 6, 2022, after the corresponding appeal of the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Kasim-Jomart Tokayev, to the heads of the CSTO member states, to the members of the Collective Security Council, to hold appropriate consultations.
In Pakistan, at least 22 people have died in their vehicles stranded by heavy snow in the mountain resort town of Murree. Some of the victims' bodies have been brought to Islamabad. Officials said most of the victims died of hypothermia. Rescuers say temperatures had fallen to -8 degrees Celsius overnight. The Interior Minister said around 1,000 vehicles were stranded Saturday. Recovery and rescue operations continue. Daniel Khan reports.
Well, reportedly, the Met Office has issued specific warnings of extreme weather conditions last week, warning of heavy snowfall in Murree and other areas. It received over 17 inches of snowfall just in one day. But despite these warnings, hundreds of thousands of people fled to witness the snowfall. The local administration says there is only a capacity of 30,000 vehicles, but over 150,000 cars reached Murree. And when the snowstorm began, there was nothing anyone could do. And now rescue and search operations have begun. Relief centers have been set up. Authorities say that it was basically the negligence in the part of the tourists who took the risk and endangered their own lives as well as the lives of their families. Well, a state of emergency has been imposed in the affected areas, and movement of traffic into Murree has been banned for now for the next 24 hours to clear the traffic jams. Military and paramilitary troops have been called in to assist the civil administration to rescue the thousands of people still trapped in different areas of Murree. Authorities and rescuers fear that the death toll may rise as several roads are still inaccessible. Though the main expressway has been cleared, many are still blocked, and relief and rescue operations are still continuing. Hotels have been opened up for the stranded tourists, and food and supplies are also being provided along with medical assistance.
Watching Africa Live, coming up in sports. It's 26 days to the Winter Olympics, and excitement is building up in Beijing.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin with the Winter Olympics, and as the Games approach, there has been a boosted interest in snow and ice sports among Chinese citizens of all ages. That includes a 4-year-old girl from Shandong province who has shown herself